All right, so in part 2 of page structure here, you're going to need a few resources. You're going to need the image here that shows the file structure and also the logo, itworksheets.com. And so let me give you a link where you can actually go and grab those resources from. So here I created a tiny URL where you can actually easily type this in. Just to give you the last couple values here, or characters, that's Y, 5, Z, 4G, 2G, J. So once you go to this URL, it's going to take you to a page that looks like this here. So it takes you to a page that looks like this here. What you want to do is just click on this green button that says code, and you can go ahead and download the zip file. Now it's going to download as a compressed state. So go ahead and download that folder here. I'm going to say show in folder. Now I already have it downloaded. But what you need to do here is you need to right click and uncompress it. In this case here, if you're using the school machine, you can just click on extract all. If you're using a Mac, it's going to basically automatically extract it for you. But a PC here, you have to uncompress that file here. So go ahead and click on extract. What that's going to do is give you an uncompressed state here. And then there's going to be a couple different files that you will need to move into your web project. Now, my web project is on my desktop here. So if I click on my desktop, here's class example. And here's my folder structure that I created within my editor. So I'm going to click on IMG, and because these are both images here, this file structure and this IT worksheet, I'm going to move both of these to my project folder. And move it to the IMG folder. I'm going to click back on my root folder. And also, because I'm going to use these files in the future here, this Calibril font, I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm going to right click and say new folder, and I'll just say font. And I'll move both of these here as well. So I'll just copy that and then drag and drop them into the font folder. And then when I go back to my editor, you'll see that now I have both images within the IMG folder, and then I have the font files that I would need for this worksheet within my folder structure. So those are the resources that I would need to complete this PDF document. So what I'm going to do now here is jump back to the PowerPoint slide here. So in the previous video, we worked on basically filling out or applying some of the tags that would go within the head of our document. So some of those tags included the title tag, which shows up in the browser tab. We talked about the meta tags. These meta tags should be found on every document that you submit in my class, right? The attribute that you're gonna change for these meta tags is gonna be the content attribute. And in the viewport, I didn't say much about the viewport, but the viewport, the importance of that tag is that whenever you visit a site from a mobile device, it's going to basically take the initial scale of the browser according to that device. And so, you know, whenever you don't have this tab, sometimes you run into the risk of the desktop version of a site pulling up on a mobile device when you know the site actually has a responsive site. And so this here actually gives the initial scale. It communicates information to the browser of whatever device is loading up your website. Anyway, more to come on that. If that didn't make a lot of sense, we'll come back and revisit this tag during responsive design, which is, I think, is like week 10 or week 9. So we'll come back and talk more about this viewport meta tag. And we had the style tag, the link tag, and like I said, this communicates information about the document. Typically what you put here is not going to render within the browser, but I want to turn our attention to the body tag. The body tag is what's going to basically, everything that gets rendered in the browser should go within the body tag. And so just to do a quick example of this here, if you go to mplsrenders.com, here's the site, right? If we were to right click and we were to say inspect, so I'm going to move this over a little bit here. If I were to navigate down to the body of our document, here's the body. You see my mouse hovering. If I were to right click and delete this element, right, it gets rid of everything that gets visually rendered. And so what I want to do here is begin to basically populate or apply tags or mark up the document within the body of our HTML document. All right. So let's focus on this section here. Introduction to Web Development Series, utilizing understanding relative and absolute file paths. So here we're going to use a tag called header. I'm sorry. And down below here, you kind of consider this our footer. Now you may be asking the question like, Chris, why did you use header and why did you use footer there? And the reason being is because in most web pages, it's just like a Word document. If you're writing a paper, you have a header and you have a footer. Typically the things that remain static or constant is going to be the header and the footer, and the things that change is the things that's in between the header and the footer. So for instance, let's go back to mplsrenders.com. If we refresh this website, let's make it a little bit bigger here. Right, here's our header, right, where my mouse is hovering. Typically you'll find the logo, the navigation, you may have like login and registration or notifications, and then at the bottom here you'll see the footer. You have some sub navigation or some links to other resources, but typically the things that you find within the header and the footer of your website, they remain static. So for instance, if we go to the login and register page, the header remained the same, right? The footer remained the same, but the things that's going to change here is going to be things in between the header and the footer. So if we were to right click this this element here and inspect, we go to the header, right? You'll see everything that is highlighted in blue is my header. If we just scroll down and find a footer, everything that's highlighted within the web page that's in blue is my footer. And typically what changes, like I said, is everything that's in between the header and the footer. And so when you look at this absolute versus relative file path worksheet, I may have multiple worksheets, right? My footer may remain the same no matter which worksheet it is, right? I may have a worksheet on FTP, File Transfer Protocol. The footer remain the same, but what will change is going to be the content in between the header. I'm sorry, the content that's in between the header and the footer, which is going to be this information here. All right, so let's go and begin to give structure to this. And that's the reason why I put header, and then what I didn't put here was the footer. So here we have our header, and what I'm going to do is begin to mark up this document. So this content here is pretty much the same height, same, I would say same font size, same font weight. So I'm going to use a heading tag or a H1 tag to give emphasis to this text here. So I'm going to use H1. I'm going to do a side by side here. So I'll just put this here. Put that there. Let me get it back into view. Give me 1 second. Okay. And I'm going to temporarily just get rid of our explore view so we just have more space to work with here. Okay, so here's our document to the left, and then we're going to begin to mark up this document here. So we have the H1, we have an opening and closing, and then what goes in between the H1 is going to be the content. And so here I'm going to put, I copy this here and paste it in. And I'm going to do another H1. I'm going to copy this text here. and paste it in. And I'm copying and pasting just for a quicker iteration. And then here, this will still be considered heading text. That's within my header, but I want to use a different lower level of emphasis heading, a lower level of emphasis here, and I'm going to use a H2 to represent this text here that's highlighted in this worksheet. And so I'm going to say H2, have my opening and closing. I want to copy this and I'll paste it in. Now, it's debatable in terms of whether or not this should be considered text within a header. And this is where you have developer freedom to make the choice on whether you think this should be within the header or not. In this case, I'm not going to actually put this text within the header of our document, but I'm going to actually put the directions, this assignment, this text here within right below the header. And so I'm going to use a P tag to notate that content. And the P tag stands for paragraph text. All right. Then next here is going to be this image. And so we have a tag in HTML called image. And remember, W3C, what they've done here is kind of created a number of different tags that would best represent some of the content that you will want to try to mark up within your document. And so we do have a tag called image. One of the attributes here that we're going to have here is called source. And we're going to give the relative file path. Remember, the relative file path is going to be the path from the index.html document. So if you wanted to reference this file structure.png, it's going to be img / file structure.png. And then typically whenever you have an image, you want to give what we call the alternative text, and that's going to be a tag attribute called alt, and then we're going to say picture of file structure. And I would say for my class, always include an alt tag with your images. You will see that in the next video here. If you don't include the alt tag, it will dock you. It will basically ding you for not necessarily making your site accessible or making that image accessible for those who may have screen readers. So make sure you always put an alternative text. If this image is broken, it's going to show the alternative text. But also if somebody has a screen reader, it's going to basically read out the text that you put for that image, because not everybody can actually see your computer screen, right? So we have to think about those who may not be able to actually see your site, or who may have screen readers. So after the image, we're going to put in a tag called HR, and that's going to represent this horizontal line in our document. And then the cool thing about HTML is that we have, so here we see that we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't necessarily have to recreate the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a unique tag called ordered list. And it's called OL, and we could begin to just put what we call list items. And then the list items will be the various questions here. So I'm going to copy that. And I'll copy this question. My last question here. Oops. And so, like I said, don't let this be confusing here. All I'm doing here is just basically, and this takes practice to understand what the OL and the LI stands for, what the HR stands for. You have to study these tags, and that's the only way we would know what these tags do, so we can appropriately apply them to the content we're trying to represent within our document. So here we have the footer tag, and that's going to be this gray area. We're going to add a logo, and we're going to begin to give structure to it. But for right now, what we're going to do here is we're going to basically add the IMG tag again. We're going to give this source, and the source is going to basically be, it's going to give the relative file path of where this resource is located in our file structure, and that's going to be this IT Worksheets logo. .png. And then here, like I said, with each image, we want to make sure we have alternative text, and we'll just basically put logo. All right, so really, we're pretty much done marking up our document, and it didn't take us that long to give structure to all the content that you see within this PDF document. We're going to save this document, and we're going to render it in the browser. But before I do that here, I just know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done to get our document to look exactly like what you see here, where my mouse is hovering. In our future videos, when we talk about CSS, we're going to begin to add some presentation to get our document to look exactly like this PDF document. But nevertheless, what we've done here is that we've given structure to all the content that you see here within this PDF. So here we have a footer that notates this gray area. This part here is going to be we kind of given some sections to our particular website, and it's going to be our header. I'm sorry, this information that I have highlighted here is going to be contained within our header. And then here we have some information between the header and the footer that we've given some structure to. So let's go ahead and render this document in the browser and see what we have here. So if you right click and then open in the browsers, in this case, I want to pick Google Chrome. And this is what we have thus far. Oops. And our image reference is broken. I probably misspelled something here. So if I right click, IT Worksheets logo.png. So if I go back to the editor, IT Works Sheets. So I'm missing, it's misspelling something here. IT Works. Oh, you know what I'm missing? IMG path, right? IMG/. Let's save that, and that should get that logo to render. So if we refresh, right? There's our logo. Like I said, there's a lot more work we need there's a lot more work in terms of getting this to look exactly like the PDF document, but nevertheless, we have all the content structure and we're ready to apply CSS. Now, we're not going to do CSS in this video series, but we'll pick up this example when we get to CSS. The next video is going to talk about how to validate our work to make sure that it complies to standards, and those are the standards that W3C set forth. And so stay tuned here for the next video, and we're going to validate our work and talk about the importance of making sure that our work is compliant to W3C standards.